The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. Welcome back to the Berean Pursuit. This is week 52, day 1. We're reading today in Job chapters 28 through 30 and Revelation chapter 18. Last time in Job, we saw that Job was complaining about how God dealt with the wicked and was not punishing those that were wicked while he was suffering as though he were wicked. And yet, even though he does talk about that, he also talks about how, yes, the wicked do in fact receive punishment and that he would hold fast to his integrity because the hypocrite or the one who is not honest cannot stand before God, and he has hope to stand before God. He wants to be with God even though all of this is happening. He has not turned his back on God. He just is upset and does not understand why what is happening. All right, well, he's going to continue on today as we read Job chapters 28 through 30. Surely there is a mine for silver and a place where gold is refined. Iron is taken from the earth and copper is smelted from ore. Man puts an end to the darkness. He probes the farthest recesses for ore in deepest darkness. Far from human habitation, he cuts a shaft in places forgotten by the foot of man. Far from men he dangles and sways. Food may come from the earth, but from below it is transformed as by fire. Its rocks are the source of sapphires, containing flecks of gold. No bird of prey knows that path. No falcon's eye has seen it. Proud beasts have never trodden it. No lion has ever prowled over it. The miner strikes the flint. He overturns mountains at their base. He hews out channels in the rocks, and his eyes spot every treasure. He stops up the sources of the streams to bring what is hidden to light. But where can wisdom be found, and where does understanding dwell? No man can know its value, nor is it found in the land of the living. The ocean depths say, "It is not in me," while the sea declares, "It is not with me." It cannot be bought with gold, nor can its price be weighed out in silver. It cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir, in precious onyx or sapphire. Neither gold nor crystal can compare to it, nor jewels of fine gold be exchanged for it. Coral and quartz are unworthy of mention. The price of wisdom is beyond rubies. Topaz from Cush cannot compare to it, nor can it be valued in pure gold. From where then does wisdom come, and where does understanding dwell? It is hidden from the eyes of every living thing, and concealed from the birds of the air. Abaddon and Death say, "We have heard a rumor about it." But God understands its way, and he knows its place. For he looks to the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. When God fixed the weight of the wind, he measured out the waters. When he set a limit for the rain and a path for the thunderbolt, then he looked at wisdom and appraised it. He established it and searched it out. And he said to man, "Behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to turn away from evil is understanding." And Job continued his discourse. "How I long for the months gone by, for the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone above my head, and by his light I walked through the darkness, when I was in my prime, when the friendship of God rested on my tent, when the Almighty was still with me and my children were around me, when my steps were bathed in cream and the rock poured out for me streams of oil, when I went out to the city gate and took my seat in the public square, the young men saw me and withdrew, and the old men rose to their feet. The princes refrained from speaking and covered their mouths with their hands. The voices of the nobles were hushed, and their tongues stuck to the roofs of their mouths. For those who heard me called me blessed, and those who saw me commended me, because I rescued the poor who cried out, and the fatherless who had no helper. The dying man blessed me, and I made the widow's heart sing for joy. I put on righteousness, and it clothed me. Justice was my robe and my turban. I served as eyes to the blind, and as feet to the lame. I was a father to the needy, and I took up the case of the stranger. I shattered the fangs of the unjust, and snatched the prey from his teeth. So I thought, I will die in my nest, and multiply my days as the sand. My roots will spread out to the waters, and the dew will rest nightly on my branches. My glory is ever new within me, and my bow is renewed in my hand. Men listen to me with expectation, waiting silently for my counsel. After my words they spoke no more. My speech settled on them like dew. They waited for me as for rain, and drank in my words like spring showers. If I smiled at them, they did not believe it. The light of my countenance was precious. I chose their course and presided as chief. So I dwelt as a king among his troops, as a comforter of the mourners. But now they mock me, men younger than I am, whose fathers I would have refused to entrust with my sheepdogs. What use to me was the strength of their hands, since their vigor had left them? Gaunt from poverty and hunger, they gnawed the dry land and the desolate wasteland by night. They plucked mallow among the shrubs, and the roots of the broom tree were their food. They were banished from among men, shouted down like thieves, so that they lived on the slopes of the wadis, among the rocks and in holes in the ground. They cried out among the shrubs and huddled beneath the nettles. A senseless and nameless brood, they were driven off the land, and now they mock me in song. I have become a byword among them. They abhor me and keep far from me. They do not hesitate to spit in my face. Because God has unstrung my bow and afflicted me, they have cast off restraint in my presence. The rabble arises at my right. They lay snares for my feet and build siege ramps against me. They tear up my path. They profit from my destruction with no one to restrain them. They advance as through a wide breach. Through the ruins they keep rolling in. Terrors are turned loose against me. They drive away my dignity as by the wind, and my prosperity has passed like a cloud. And now my soul is poured out within me. Days of affliction grip me. Night pierces my bones, and my gnawing pains never rest. With great force he grasps my garment. He seizes me by the collar of my tunic. He throws me into the mud, and I have become like dust and ashes. I cry out to you for help, but you do not answer. When I stand up, you merely look at me. You have ruthlessly turned on me. You oppose me with your strong hand. You snatch me up into the wind and drive me before it. You toss me about in the storm. Yes, I know that you will bring me down to death, to the place appointed for all the living. Yet no one stretches out his hand to a ruined man when he cries for help in his distress. Have I not wept for those in trouble? Has my soul not grieved for the needy? But when I hoped for good, evil came. When I looked for light, darkness fell. I am churning within and cannot rest. Days of affliction confront me. I go out blackened, but not by the sun. I stand up in the assembly and cry for help. I have become a brother of jackals, a companion of ostriches. My skin grows black and peels, and my bones burn with fever. My harp is tuned to mourning, and my flute to the sound of weeping. And now to the New Testament in Revelation chapter 18. Last time in Revelation, in chapter 17, we saw this great prostitute who was the Babylon the Great, the city that ruled over the kings of the earth and sat on the beast that had 7 heads, which were 7 hills or mountains, and also were 7 kings. And this pretty clearly, I believe, represents Rome, although others view this as Jerusalem still that it's talking about. But it's moved to where it's talking about this woman who is drunk on the blood of the saints. She is someone who has been persecuting the Christians, killing them. And so that applied to Jerusalem, that applied to Rome. Both of them fell. Both of them were punished by God. And so the principle is the same no matter what. But he's going to continue talking about this Babylon the Great as we enter our reading today. So let's get into it in Revelation chapter 18. After this, I saw another angel descending from heaven with great authority, and the earth was illuminated by his glory. And he cried out in a mighty voice, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a lair for demons and a haunt for every unclean spirit, every unclean bird, and every detestable beast. All the nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her immorality. The kings of the earth were immoral with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown wealthy from the extravagance of her luxury." Then I heard another voice from heaven say, "Come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins or contract any of her plagues. For her sins are piled up to heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Give back to her as she has done to others. Pay her back double for what she has done. Mix her a double portion in her own cup. As much as she has glorified herself and lived in luxury, give her the same measure of torment and grief. In her heart she says, 'I sit as queen. I am not a widow and will never see grief.' Therefore her plagues will come in one day, death and grief and famine, and she will be consumed by fire, for mighty is the Lord God who judges her. Then the kings of the earth who committed sexual immorality and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail at the sight of the smoke rising from the fire that consumes her. In fear of her torment, they will stand at a distance and cry out, 'Woe, woe to the great city, the mighty city of Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come.' And the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, because there is no one left to buy their cargo of gold, silver, precious stones and pearls, of fine linen, purple, silk, and scarlet, of all kinds of citron wood and every article of ivory, precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble, of cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, and frankincense, of wine, olive oil, fine flour, and wheat, of cattle, sheep, horses, and chariots, of slaves and souls of men. And they will say, 'The fruit of your soul's desire has departed from you. All your luxury and splendor have vanished, never to be seen again.' The merchants who sold these things and grew their wealth from her will stand at a distance in fear of her torment. They will weep and mourn, saying, 'Woe, woe to the great city, clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, for in a single hour such fabulous wealth has been destroyed.' Every shipmaster, passenger, and sailor, and all who make their living from the sea will stand at a distance and cry out at the sight of the smoke rising from the fire that consumes her. 'What city was ever like this great city?' they will exclaim. Then they will throw dust on their heads as they weep and mourn and cry out, 'Woe, woe to the great city, where all who had ships on the sea were enriched by her wealth, for in a single hour she has been destroyed. Rejoice over her, O heaven, O saints and apostles and prophets, because God has pronounced for you his judgment against her.' Then a mighty angel picked up a stone the size of a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, 'With such violence the great city of Babylon will be cast down, never to be seen again. And the sound of harpists and musicians, of flute players and trumpeters will never ring out in you again. Nor will any craftsman of any trade be found in you again, nor the sound of a millstone be heard in you again. The light of a lamp will never shine in you again, and the voices of a bride and bridegroom will never call out in you again. For your merchants were the great ones of the earth, because all the nations were deceived by your sorcery. And there was found in her the blood of prophets and saints, and of all who had been slain on the earth." All right, in our reading today, we were seeing in Job how he continued on talking about God and how he was dealing with him, but he started off talking about wisdom and how man digs deep into the ground and mines out all kinds of things, but what he cannot mine out is wisdom, and he can't even get enough of precious gems and things like that you can buy wisdom, because it's worth more than all of that. And it can only be found in God. God is the one who has true wisdom. But then he started remembering how things used to be, how good things were, because he was doing what was right, because he stood up for the needy, because he helped those that needed help. He was blessed, and he thought it would always be that way because he was still doing the same things. But that's not how it always turns out, and that's not how it turned out for him in this case, because Satan was the one coming after him now, and God allowed it, but it was for God's glory and for Job's benefit and for our benefit, that we can see that even someone who does all these wonderful things still can suffer like this. And he talked about how the people that he would not even trust with his sheepdogs are now spitting in his face, and he is a byword to them. He is somebody that they really just mock and look down on, and it's because he's just miserable. He can't do anything about it. Everything he has is taken away, and his skin is blackened and just cracking, and just he is absolutely miserable. The way he describes himself, there's no wonder why his friends were silent for a whole week when they came to visit him, and they threw that dust in the air and were crying when they saw him. But they just think he must have been doing something wicked. And he's saying, no, I kept doing what I was supposed to do. I was a blessing to others, but this has still happened to me. All right, then in Revelation 18, we see this continuation of talking about Babylon falling. And here we find a lot of language that comes from the prophecies in the Old Testament, both about Babylon itself and about Tyre and some of these great cities that God was going to bring judgment on in those past times. So this a picture of trading with all the nations that's very similar to the language used regarding Tyre, telling his people to come out so they do not share in the sins and in the punishment. That's very similar to what was said about Babylon itself. And so we find that it may not be specifically that these things specifically are applying to whatever city this is, but that we're expected to connect what's happening to this city to what God did to those other cities in the past, and see that God's pattern has not changed. The way he works has not changed. And of course, that tells us that even though this is talking about a particular city long ago, and this judgment came upon it long ago, but God does not change. And so if there's any nation or city that is persecuting his people like these nations did, eventually he is going to bring this kind of judgment against it as well. All right. Well, that is the reading for today. Join me again tomorrow as we're in our last week, and Lord willing, we're going to complete our reading as we go through this week on this Berean pursuit.